Well, clinical trials are a really important construct for patients, but actually many patients don't really understand what clinical trials are. So the first really important thing for patients and patient organizations is to really understand all about clinical trials and actually to think about the pros and cons of trials. So although we're all advocating for more trials, it's not something that I think that I advocate necessarily for. It's not about more trials. It's about getting the right trials and getting patients into the right trials. There's nothing worse to think for patients as a resource to be wasted in a trial that isn't clinically relevant or clinically plausible, and for which there isn't really a plan to do anything with the data. So I think when your organization and your advocates are thinking about clinical trials, I think there needs to be some caution, not just to think about volume of trials and more trials, but to try and balance that with getting the right trials for your country or for your region. So trials serve many different purposes to many different stakeholders, for example. So clinical trials play a very, very important role in accessing new treatments that otherwise would not be available. And that is a very good and very important and very legitimate reason to do clinical trials in countries, even if the results of these trials don't benefit future patients. The fact that 20 patients from Romania or Hungary or Poland or Slovakia are in that trial means that they're getting access potentially to effective treatments. Otherwise, they might not get treatment at all. So that's also a very, very important reason to think about clinical trials. So this is a very complex area. It's not as simple as just saying, and I'm not saying that's what you are saying, Barbara, or your foundation, that it's just about trials, but as advocates, we need to step back and ask fundamental questions around why are we doing these trials? What function, what role does that trial play? Is it a trial to get access to medicines for a cohort of patients, say in Poland, that otherwise would go without? Tick the box, that's a very legitimate reason to do it. Or is it about saying, well, we have to answer an important question for the Polish healthcare system, because if we don't answer that question, it may be that the health system might say, we don't want to pay for that treatment. Um, it might be asking questions in an academic trial scenario that a drug company might not be interested in, for example. So it might be a question about quality of life, or it might be a question about optimal dosing or optimal administration, which are all really, really important questions to address in real world clinical practice so that you're able to personalize and adapt and to stratify treatment for different patients and different needs. These questions are never asked in the regulatory study. So again, it's incumbent upon us as advocates to really define what type of trials we think we need in Central and Eastern Europe, and what fundamental questions these trials will answer, and who benefits. Is it just the patients in the trial? Is it the health system and the payer because they get the answer to the question, do they need? Or is it future patients will benefit because it answers an important question for all patients in the future? So several reasons why clinical trials are important, but obviously pros and cons, and you've got to understand the detail to make sure that the patients that you represent are going into the right trial for the right reason. And this is also important from an efficiency point of view, because there are way too many trials in myeloma, for example, duplicating effort all over the world, 20 trials looking at the same target. There's some trials that will be delayed and never read out. It's such a waste. Patients are precious on so many levels.